Hello and welcome to La Course en Tête, coming to you from the Breton Badlands of Pontivy, where the main pursuits are crepes, galettes and cider drinking. And by cider drinking, American listeners, I mean hard cider, not apple juice with bite. And when we talk about crepes, galettes and hard cider, that's just the press buffet. This is our in-depth coverage of the 2021 Tour de France in association with Peloton magazine and our presenting sponsor, Hyperice, keeping this year's teams fresh day after day. And boy, do they need it. Cue the musica. My name's OJ Borge. As always, bonjour to our Aérogramme subscribers. And I may well be sat in a studio on the Salford Riviera right now, and by that I mean a drizzly ship canal in northern UK. But I'm joined by the Brittany three, or as I like to call them, the three Brittany. Jeremy Whittle, Peter Cossins and Sophie Smith. Hello to all of you.
Good evening.
Hello, OJ.
Hello.
Good evening, good evening. A wild opening weekend to the Tour, but already the race is heading into week one. The scene has been set, but, Jeremy Whittle, is the die cast?
I don't think so. After 3 stages, it's difficult to tell because we've had so much chaos, so much carnage on the road, so many crashes as well, that really it still feels like everything is up for grabs.
Because, I mean, somebody who'll remain nameless may have said the first week looked really boring of this Tour de France. Egg on their face, whoever it's been, because it's been wall-to-wall action of both positives and negatives. Should we start with the positives before we do the negatives and all the crashes? Should we start there, Jeremy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've seen incredibly thrilling racing. That it's a mixed bag, isn't it? Because the riders would say that they've been kind of treated like show ponies. But on the other hand, I'm sure the TV ratings for kind of the last 3 days of racing, looking ahead as well into the rest of the week with the time trial coming on Wednesday, I'm sure that, you know, the audiences are pretty big for this because it's been a very kind of crash bang opening weekend to the Tour.
Yeah, well, I just want to go through the first couple of stages, if that's cool, because there was Alaphilippe's win on stage one, first Frenchman to wear yellow on the opening day, I think, for 20 years, first world champion to wear it for nigh on 50 years. It was a fitting opener to the Tour de France, Sophie.
Yes, OJ. I know you want him to win the Tour de France, and he's not going to win the Tour de France, but he did take the first yellow jersey in very fitting fashion. It's why we love Alaphilippe, in that he is a bit of a showman. He is known for his panache. And of course he was going to take the yellow jersey on the first day. I never doubted that. I think I said that in the last podcast.
I think you may have done. I do still think Alaphilippe is going to win the Tour, and I'm going to keep banging that drum until we get to Paris and he crosses the line in yellow. Then if we're talking about another positive, there was Mathieu van der Poel's win at Mer de Bretagne on Sunday, stage 2. Pete, you were at the press conference with Mathieu van der Poel. He was super emotional, which I think the point had been made by somebody far more intelligent than me. He rides like a robot sometimes. He rides like an absolute machine, and then you don't usually see all this emotion from him, but he was so emotional. Describe to us why that was, because it's to do with his grandfather.
Yeah, he's the grandson of Raymond Poulidor, obviously. Christian Prudhomme, the tour director, describes Poulidor as not only the greatest cyclist that France has ever had, but the greatest athlete that France has ever had. I mean, that's debatable, but certainly he's probably the most popular. He finished 8 times on the Tour de France podium. He was third 5 times, second 3 times, never won the race and never wore the yellow jersey. And of course, that's what he was remembered for. Ironically, he actually ended up working for Crédit Lyonnais, who sponsored the yellow jersey as their ambassador. So he ended up wearing yellow every day at the Tour de France. But he died in November 2019, just into his 80s then. And Mathieu he was hoping that he would make his debut at the Tour before his grandfather died, and he'd be able to win the yellow jersey and have a photo of them taken with it together. Unfortunately, that wasn't to be. So, it was a hugely emotional moment for him. And like you said, this kind of robot-like figure just cracked. He was kind of in tears or on the verge of tears all the way through his press conference. It was quite staggering to see, and obviously emotional for everybody watching it too.
It was very emotional. It was great. It was really, really great to watch, not just the ride, but the emotion afterwards and what it meant to him. So let's hear a bit from that press conference. This is Mathieu van der Poel speaking to the press.
And what does it mean to take this jersey because of, your grandfather? Tell us a bit more about the tradition and how you and your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I've seen the jersey once or twice maybe, but it's not hang up in the house or something. It was, I think, somewhere upstairs in a box, so it's not that I saw it every day, but just it's very special to wear yellow jersey my first Tour de France, and like I said, it was pretty emotional because imagine he was here and we could have taken a photo together. He in his the Canadian shirt and in this jersey would have been quite a photo, I think. And yeah.
Mathieu van der Poel there. Right, we've done the positive. Let's do the negative. Ale, OP and Omi, a fan on stage 1, caused a humongous crash as she stood in the road holding a sign, which Tony Martin then hit, bringing down the majority of the peloton. Now, there's a lot to talk about here because, as Jeremy tweeted out yesterday, she looks like she's going to be sued. Everyone's getting sued right now because, Jeremy, it is quite a big thing for a spectator to be sued. Police are looking for her. ASO are planning to sue her. Is this the right course of action?
Well, I've got the feeling that suddenly may kind of recede a bit into the rearview mirror, given the events of stage 3, where we saw so many crashes. But yes, there's a lot of saber rattling about this spectator who apparently has gone to ground. She's probably, hiding in a camper van or in a gîte somewhere and scared to come out for the next couple of years, I'd imagine, after the witch hunt that has been perpetuated on social media. At the same time, I wrote a piece a couple of days ago about how, the Tour has always had these problems. I think the only time I can think of anybody being sued was when Eddy Merckx was punched on Puy de Dôme in the 70s, towards the latter stage of his career, by a spectator. Merckx was very unpopular because he was so dominant. And he brought a case against the spectator, and I believe he won damages, but it was to the point where it was kind of, insignificant, only enough money to buy a beer, but it was a kind of Pyrrhic victory. And I think, you have to accept that this is the Tour de France. Thousands of people come to the roadside over the years who are not really schooled in cycling, but they come because it's a global event. They don't necessarily know how fast the peloton moves, and they make mistakes, and we see it time and time again.
It does feel like a mistake, Sophie. I mean, I've watched it a few times. I mean, I feel horrendous for the spectator, whoever it was, because it's the sort of thing that would live with you for not just the rest of this Tour de France. It'd live with you for years. You'd always be the person who brought down an entire peloton and ended, a couple of tours for a couple of people. She didn't step in to the road. Does that make any difference? As in, she didn't step out as they were coming past. She was already stood there. Does that help at all, her case?
Jez just said it, like this witch hunt is kind of the correct word. Like, yes, she made a massive mistake, and yes, there were huge consequences. And I also said this on Twitter as well and got slammed for it, but it was a mistake. I think the outroar on social media, A, wasn't reflective of what riders, or most riders who at least I spoke to in the peloton, were saying, and B, wasn't reflective. It's not like she did something malicious. It's not like she purposely ran out in front of the peloton as they were approaching. She's got, and I've said this for I feel like I'm repeating myself like 5 times because everyone keeps talking about this woman and labeling her an imbecile or an idiot. And I just think it's incredibly short-sighted. I drove that course that day and there were fans, like thousands of fans everywhere. And they've all just come out of lockdown, and either whether they're cycling fans or whether they're just there for the spectacle, that's what people love about the Tour. The riders love it. Sometimes they hate it, but most of the time, that's why that's all part of it, that atmosphere. And I don't know her, I haven't spoken to her, but from what I know of that atmosphere, there are 5 helicopters that go over, that follow the peloton every stage of the Tour. And at least one of those has a massive camera on the front of the helicopter to take all the shots of the crowds and whatever else. And if you look at that photo, this woman's obviously got a placard to her grandparents of all things. It's not like she's trying to become the next France Idol or something. She's got a placard to her grandparents and she's focused on this helicopter that's presumably, and that helicopter dips quite low, focused on her. The rest of the crowd is turned the other way. And she's obviously, you don't always hear the peloton. I shouldn't admit this, but I've almost done it. I've been in Qatar where there's absolutely no fans and almost walked in front of the peloton because they arrive so quickly sometimes that you don't hear them, and they don't. I think she's in the moment. She's a Tour de France fan. She's been distracted by a helicopter that's in front of her. She wants to send a loving message and perhaps not realize like driving on an autobahn that, something that was 10 minutes behind her is now 10 seconds behind her. Yeah, she made a mistake and it had very drastic consequences. But again, I don't know how you can police this and say there are no crowds, which I don't think is what the majority of riders want. All the riders I spoke to weren't vilifying her at the end of the stage. They were just saying you just need to give us a bit more space. And you can look at the other side of the argument, and then you either have no fans, and they are part of the tour, or you police thousands of kilometres a day, which is now impossible, or you just educate people, you educate fans. You say, give the rider space, stand back a bit.
Is it something that the caravan could help do? Because the caravan obviously goes through ahead of the peloton, giving out the promotional shirts. Could they not be suggesting, stand back? Because, I mean, there's one thing here, Pete. Do you think this accident, seeing what's happened, seeing the witch hunt, seeing these who's suing who and everyone's in trouble and being hunted on social media, which is just unsavoury for everyone, do you think it will help in future with people not wanting to be her?
I don't think so, no, because I think you get caught up in the moment. I'm always kind of horrified when I see fans running alongside riders on climbs and whatever, urging them on and almost knocking them off their bikes and running into each other. And then I remember speaking to a guy who I knew from a cycling club back in England about it, and one of the other club members, he'd seen him actually on the TV running alongside some guy in Alpe d'Huez or one of the other big climbs, and he'd asked him about it later, and he said, I just didn't know what I was doing. I just kind of got wrapped up in the moment. And I think Julian Alaphilippe, the AG2R La Mondiale director sportif, made an interesting point. He said he thought it was kind of all the exuberance and kind of this woman's mistake, error, whatever, was part of it, was partly due to the fact that the COVID restrictions have been lifted, and everybody's kind of in a bit of a state of euphoria. Everybody's a bit giddy. We saw on the stage after she brought riders down in the bunch, we saw very dangerous situations where the riders were riding through towns, and the crowd was surging in on both sides and kind of encroaching into the road just because of sheer numbers. And I think there's just an element of people have forgotten how to behave. They're just a bit overexcited, and it'll settle down. I mean, I agree with Sophie. Really, I don't really like this witch hunt and this kind of desire that's been there to kind of hunt this woman down. I mean, it almost feels like we're in some kind of Bourne movie now. They're trying to track her down across France. Has she gone across borders? Has she been smuggled somewhere?
It's more like the Dark Ages rather than Bourne.
It's just becoming ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it is tar and feathering territory, isn't it? It does feel like that. So that's one of the crashes. That was the big one that happened on stage one. But then looking through stage two and stage three, we have been inundated with crashes. Jeremy, there's probably too many to go through. What is the reason for all these crashes? Is it an excitable peloton? Is it the nerves of a Tour de France? Is it the parkour? Is it the tight roads of Brittany?
I think it's all of those things. And I think it's also the kind of, the massive scramble to make the most of the opportunities for exposure in the biggest race of the year. You've got to remember that if these crashes happened in even a race like Paris-Nice, which is the second biggest stage race in France, or Tirreno-Adriatico, second biggest stage race in Italy, if they happened there, they get no attention, no focus. But because the Tour is this global showcase for cycling, it's a victim of its own success. Every time a rider goes down in the Tour, there's 56 different camera angles. It's absolutely kind of a huge storm on social media. The riders interviewed 56 times. Everybody looks at the medical reports. I mean, in which other race does everybody scour the medical reports for cuts and abrasions? This is the only cycling race in which that happens. And all of the team managers I've spoken to this afternoon after stage three and into kind of, this evening as well, looking ahead towards the rest of the stages this week, they're all kind of saying the same thing, that it's a combination of poor course design, so too many sharp bends before a sprint finish, too many slap bang wallop kind of moments where the course doesn't recognise the speed that the peloton's going. If it had been a mountain stage, it would have been fine, but not on a sprint stage.
Do you buy that though? Because I've listened to a few people talking about this. And Chris Boardman, for one, I was listening to him talk about it, and he was saying, but these are the same roads these riders have always raced on. It's what the Tour de France has always been. This is not the first time they're riding on small roads. They ride Paris-Roubaix, they ride all this. This is the territory they ride.
I agree, yeah, I agree. I think that's a valid point. But at the same time, the focus, even on a race like like Paris-Roubaix, which is one of the biggest one-day races in cycling, if not the biggest, then, you know, even in a race like that, the media focus is not so intense. This is right under the spotlight in the media glare. You know, the media are here from all over the world, even with the pandemic. And, you know, everyone's looking for a sensational story. Everyone's looking for a big story. You know, this afternoon we got it. And it's funny because the tour organisation was, you know, obviously talking about suing the Spectator from the crash on Saturday, but now everybody's piling in on them and saying that they should design the course better. So, you know, who's suing who?
Is that a song? I believe if that's not a song, it should be.
It's an Aretha Franklin classic,
who's
isn't it?
suing who? Let's talk about just one crash in particular at the end of stage 3, and that was Caleb Ewan, who is out of the Tour de France, Sophie. I mean, that is a blow for him, because surely there was the chance that he could have taken green this year.
Green was something he was actually targeting this year. Previous years, he said that it wasn't a focus for him, that he just wanted to focus on stages, and I think that genuinely is a desire for Caleb. He's possibly, until Sam Bennett won it last year, I will say that, hadn't really figured on his radar. I think his main motivation was to win, preferably in the same year, stages at every Grand Tour. That was his definition of success. But certainly coming in today's, what was the first, if you want, proper sprint stage, he definitely would have been motivated for that. He's an exceptional athlete, Caleb, and he came in here, I'm going to say, with no national bias, I'm being serious about that, as the top build sprinter. The others might not agree with me there. With a dialed lead-out train. So for this to happen, he's spoken briefly, I presume, from hospital, maybe from the team hotel. He's broken his collarbone and fractured his collarbone in 4 places. So it was a disastrous consequence from him. He's just saying it was a touch of wheels in reading the road when the peloton was going left to right or right to left. And Peter Sagan has come down with him. I saw Sagan pass the finish line and he seemed okay. But it's a massive blow to Caleb and the team because, so far as I know, as Jeremy said, this is, for sprinters especially, this is where they make their careers. This race is the be-all and end-all for them, really. And he's now going to have to require surgery to fix his collarbone. So it's a disastrous day for Lotto Soudal, actually.
Time to talk now about our presenting sponsor. I'm going to do that whilst using their product because I have one and it's amazing. And I think it'd be a nice way to do it as I get my legs fresh again, because I did do a session on the turbo earlier. And now, if you've ever wondered how the Tour de France riders stay fresh and keep pushing day after day, there's the hot spot. They recover with Hyperice's top recovery tech, including the Normatec 2.0 recovery systems after every stage. Normatec technology uses dynamic, compression to increase circulation to the legs, flush out muscle soreness, and helps riders revive themselves quickly. Take your endurance to the next level like a pro. Hyperice technology, including the Normatec 2.0, is available at trekbikes.com. Click the Hyperice banner on our homepage, which is pelotonmagazine.com, to claim a special Tour de France offer. I take it now is probably a good time to talk about who's left standing, because it has been, as we've said, lots of crashes and lots of plans have been laid to waste. So as we record this, which is after stage 3, I can tell you that Mathieu van der Poel is currently wearing yellow. Alaphilippe is 8 seconds down. Carapaz 31 seconds down on him, same time as Wout van Aert. And then it gets interesting. Wilco Kelderman 38 seconds down. Tadej Pogacar 39 seconds down. Enric Mas of Movistar 40 seconds down. And so on down. And all of the big names we were talking about beforehand go right. Thomas, who had his own problem today. Did anybody actually watch him get his shoulder put back in after he dislocated it, Jeremy? You love a horror film.
Unfortunately, I was stuck in some road closures when that happened, but I kind of, having dislocated my thumb locking the back door during the winter.
Almost the same.
That should have been live on TV.
Yeah. Did you continue on with your day as well?
I managed to recover brilliantly and continue typing. But yeah, I mean, I think it was obviously that's hugely painful. But I mean, credit to him because he finished. He didn't finish in the front group, but he finished with Pogacar.
Well, he finished ahead of Primož Roglič, which is the thing, considering that he'd been sat on the floor with a tap on the shoulder from teammates.
I mean, I think it was a spectacular recovery from what could have been a disaster.
And then Primož Roglič went down again. He's 135 down now, and so on and so on. So I guess the point is, Pete, maybe we should look at who's standing from a GC point of view. All plans are out of the window, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. It was only a few days ago, just before the race started, that we were looking at, if you take Ineos, for example, and saying, well, they've kind of got a four-pronged attack. They had Thomas, Carapaz, Richie Porte and Theo Geoghegan-Hart. I mean, based on what we've seen in the opening few days, it now looks like they've got a one-pronged attack with Carapaz as their main prong. Thomas is not far behind, but obviously he's got this shoulder problem. Richie Porte has lost time. Geoghegan-Hart is basically there working as a domestique for the others, and they'll need him in the mountains, that's for certain. And that's just one team. I mean, we saw Jumbo Visma. They've had problems with. They lost Robert Haysink. He crashed out in the same incident that Geraint Thomas went down in. Obviously, Roglič is a bit battered. I mean, he said that he's not broken any bones, but he's lost a lot of skin. I mean, he rode, I don't know, the last 15, 20 kilometres into the stage finish on stage 3 with his half his leg showing and his buttocks. And they look pretty tender, I have to say. So I mean, there is a case of it almost being last man standing. I mean, I think that's one of the bad things about the way things have gone during the first few days. That you don't want to see a Tour de France decided like that. You want to see it decided by somebody being faster or more agile or thinking more quickly. And at the moment, it just seems like it's just so frantic. You almost want the riders to kind of slow down to take stock. I mean, Jeremy was kind of piling in on the race organisers, and I don't think it's completely down to them at all. I mean, the speed of the race is just going up and up and up.
I wouldn't call that piling in. That was a mild criticism. It wasn't piling in.
You wait till he piles in. That's happening in a bit.
Yeah.
It's all right, Jez. Just own it. Just go there.
Well, I think that there's an element of anybody, of all the stakeholders in cycling have got to kind of take stock of what's going on and reflect on how races are going. I mean, there was an extraordinary moment at the end of the third stage where French TV interviewed Marc Madiot, and he basically, I mean, he's an emotional man and he's very outspoken, and he was basically saying, look, he said, I don't want to be in a situation before too long where I'm ringing up somebody's mother and telling them that their son is never going to come out of the hospital because they've been in an accident today. He said this isn't the kind of sport that we're seeing now that parents are going to want their children to get into because it's far too dangerous. We need to do something about it. And I mean, it's kind of reflected in the GC battle, I guess.
You know, I have loved watching the Tour de France so far. It's been exciting, the thrills, the spills, the drama, and things like that. But would I want my two kids to be riders watching them doing that? I'd have my heart in my mouth the whole time. I wouldn't stop them if they wanted to do it. Pete, would you be the same? You've been around cycling a long time. Would you want your kids to be a pro rider?
I don't think so. No, I mean, I love riding my bike with both of my kids. I mean, my son he's 13 and he's good on a bike, but I mean, it frightens the hell out of me when he goes out on it. But to see him racing with these guys in the way they are now, absolutely not. No way.
Can I say, as the only person in this group that doesn't have children, so this is very easy for me to say, and I'm looking at it, do you not look at today's stage as, I'm going to get hammered for this, but a bit of an exception? Like, for example, earlier this morning, Philippa York was in the press room and we were having lunch at the same table, and she said categorically there's going to be a crash today because of the way the last 150 metres, not even the last 10 kilometres, was set out. Apparently at the start of the race there was a group of riders, or certain riders, that raised concern to the CPA about the last 10k of the finish. Now, why they do that on the day of the stage and not last October when the route is released, I'm not entirely sure. But do you not look at stages perhaps like today where it's not entirely smart to have a downhill finish or a narrow road into a 3 kilometre section? And this is exactly what Roger Klug said to me after stage 3. Is that not that smart? Do you change the rules, or do you just have, as he suggested, a 10 kilometre finishing circuit where that doesn't matter. So you don't have GC teams and sprint teams unnecessarily, I'm going to say, like go down a descent in a narrow road within the last 10 kilometres of the race.
I mean, one thing I'd say about that is that I understand from what was said after the finish that the Ineos Grenadiers, Gabriel Rasch, their sport director, told the press that they'd actually recceed the finale of this stage, so they knew what was going to happen, the likely speeds, the likely flash points, and the danger points, etc., etc. Now, okay, that may seem a bit over attentive and kind of.
Well, they didn't recce the neutralised start, did they? That's where they should have recceed.
Well, yeah, mate. Well, no, he was 37k when Geraint Thomas went down, so that's way after neutralisation. But what I'd say is that most teams do massive recce's of all the mountain stages because they think those are going to be crucial. Primož Roglic is now over a minute behind Richard Carapaz, and that's mainly because of the crash this afternoon that he suffered in stage 3. Maybe they should be recceing the last 20 kilometres of these stages too.
So just with Ineos in mind, what is their plan A now? Is it Carapaz? Does it come down to the time trial, which happens on stage 5? What is plan A, Jeremy, for Ineos?
I think it has to be Carapaz. I mean, he's, as I said last time we spoke, I think he's a force of nature. I think he's a beast on a bike. Geraint, I think, is, to the qualities he showed this in stage 3, where he was dislocated his shoulder. I mean, you can imagine dislocating his shoulder.
Before that, stage 2, he was dropped.
Yeah, So then you'd say, has he got it or not? I mean, on what we've seen so far, on balance, I think he's just short, and that may well come back to bite me. But he just looks a bit short of where he needs to be at the moment. Whereas Carapaz has been up there every single day. He didn't miss Alaphilippe's attack on the first stage. He didn't miss Mathieu van der Poel on the second stage, and he was up there again this afternoon in stage 3. So I think that he is their main man.
So I'll tell you what, then let's look through the next few days, because it is going to be interesting as we get towards the first rest day. Largely focused on sprints, with 3 possibly more stages that might suit the sprinters. Sophie, you've been following the sprint group as seen through the eyes of Michael Matthews. He's having a pretty roller coaster ride, isn't he?
He is. He's more a versatile sprinter than a pure sprinter. But I really did. I did feel I've got a lot of time for Michael Matthews, and after stage 1, where he finished second, I've got to say, in a very impressive sprint with for second from Primož Roglic and obviously behind Julian Alaphilippe. Could not have said that more unelegantly if I tried. He went from that high, and I spoke to him after that race, and he took so many positives from that, and he thought that stage 2 was going to suit him even more, to saying that the first lap of the finishing circuit on stage 2, his legs just blew up. And Matthews is one of those riders who really cares and really takes it to heart. So past the finish line of stage 2, he kind of actually just pulled up, and his shoulders were heavy, and he was leaning over his handlebars, and it took him a few minutes, maybe even 5 minutes, to really just sort of reconcile with himself what had happened. He was quite disappointed about that, and he was in the green jersey as well. And the green jersey for him, he's won it once before, so I think that wasn't an outright aim for him, but it is something that would be in the back of his mind.
Well, let's hear from him, because this is him after stage 1.
Yeah, I think definitely happy with the way the race went. The goal was the stage win today. There was just one guy stronger than me, unfortunately. So, yeah, I think we did a good race. We got also top 3 in the intermediate sprint, which was good, and then finishing off with second in the finish there. I think it's a good start to the Tour de France, that's for sure.
What does today mean for tomorrow? First day out of the way.
It means Alaphilippe's flying. But I think tomorrow's another day. It's a little bit different than today. It's quite punchy, and then falls flat to the finish there. So tomorrow's another day.
And here's how he felt on Sunday.
I guess after my performance yesterday, I expected quite a bit out of myself, and maybe yesterday took more out of me than I maybe thought it did. So I guess in one word, disappointed.
Massive difference there. And then, Pete, if we look, of course, across some of the other stages, yes, it gets climby as we get to the weekend. How important is this time trial on stage 5? It's not a massive time trial, 27.2 kilometres. It's not particularly rolling. It's fairly flat. How much of a sorting out of the general classification? Yes, we're only a few days into the Tour de France, but do you think there will be there?
I think it's going to be an interesting time trial. It does roll a bit. I mean, from what those riders who've wrecked it have said, it's harder than the time trial at the end. They're almost the same length. This one's just a little bit shorter. It does roll. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the weather because it's been a bit wet. We've had a bit of wind, so that might have an impact. And of course, a lot of these riders are banged up. Roglic is banged up. Pogačar has been on the ground. Thomas is obviously struggling as well. And I mean, that might work in the favour of somebody like Richard Carapaz, who would probably expect to lose a lot of time on a stage like this, but has actually kind of come through those first days unscathed and probably be in pretty good shape in the time trial. But I mean, it's not going to decide the race, obviously, but it might kind of decide the hierarchy within certain teams, Ineos being the most obvious one. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out between the two Slovenian riders as well, Roglic and Pogačar. I mean, obviously, they kind of have time trial history from last year. They've been very closely matched, or they were very closely matched on the first two stages. Then Roglic went down. In theory, he's a better time trialist. Does this kind of push the advantage back to Pogačar? I don't know. We'll find out. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
This is an impossible question, Jeremy, but do you see the drama stopping in this first week?
Oh, God, no. I mean, this is just the mise en bouche, the aperitif to the main course, even the entree. You know, I think we've got, you know, a gourmand menu ahead of us. So I think, you know, we've only done three stages. We're looking ahead to the rest of this week, rest of the first week. But by the time we get towards the Alps on Saturday and Sunday, then I think, you know, there's going to be more fireworks, definitely.
Come on, no, can you do the end of that, please, with more culinary analogies in there, please?
No.
It has been a wonderful start. I mean, I'm somebody who over the years has bemoaned these big long sprint stages, which are transfer stages. You know, break goes, break gets caught, and then there's a sprint after it. We haven't seen that this year, Jeremy. We haven't seen that at all. Do you think next year's Tour de France will have a start like this again, which will be all exciting, all interesting, but yes, maybe is a little bit on the, I don't want to say dangerous, because dangerous is the wrong word, that maybe has fireworks in it, which sometimes is the detriment to the riders. Do you think we'll see it again?
Well, it's a kind of be careful what you wish for situation, isn't it? Everybody in cycling bemoans kind of, or used to bemoan the lack of coverage for the sport. It's become a hugely popular sport. One of the reasons it's popular is because it's so spectacular, it's so gladiatorial, you know, and unlike watching, you know, everyone in Europe is watching the Euros at the moment, the football competition between the kind of major European nations. You know, cycling is so far removed from that in terms of, you know, the blood and guts of it, the gladiatorial nature of it. And I think that's something you can't afford to lose. Now, that sounds pretty heartless because that sounds like I embrace the fact that riders will be injured and will be left, you know, lying on bends and stuff and being attended to by medical staff. But at the same time, I think it's the element of danger and risk that makes this sport so spectacular and so compelling. You don't get it anywhere else. You don't get it in even in horse racing, even in kind of, you know, I mean, motor racing, yes, but motor racing has become a very sanitized sport. Cycling is still so incredibly thrilling when it's like it was this afternoon. And that's, you know, that's something that, okay, for the participants, it's hard going, but for everyone else involved in it, it's absolutely addictive.
It has been great to watch. It has been great to watch. So we're pretty much to the end of this podcast. As always, thank you for listening. Jeremy, what have you got left of that bottle of rosé? Just the one glass?
No, I finished the bottle. I'm on to kind of a follow-up glass now.
He's opened the second.
Okay, and you're by the sea, so there was talk of you donning a dressing gown.
Can you hear the waves? Can you hear
Hang
the
on.
waves?
Sophie, I know you had a whiskey.
Oh, yeah, that finished before we started the podcast. Come on. Caleb Ewan crashed, Jack Haig crashed. Today was a disaster. It's horrible crashes. Everyone crossed the finish line looking just like despondent or, I'm trying to not swear, frustrated.
No, feel free. We've still got an allotment of beeps to put in. Feel free to swear.
Have you got a beeper? Yeah, okay. Off. There was a lot of, the entire peloton virtually crossed the line. off. It was a disaster.
Was anybody else surprised that when Sophie said she was going to swear, she only said the word?
What do you think I was going to say? I said a lot more. I said a lot more past the finish. Someone actually looked at me. It's a terrible Australian stereotype, and I was like, it always doesn't exist. But I dropped a few words past the finish line, and someone just looked at me and was like, oh, Australian.
Typical Australian.
Yeah.
Just talking of that, do you think we'll see a twitchy rest of these stages now? Knowing so many crashes have happened, know that so many tours are hanging by a thread. Do you think everyone will be twitchy?
No, this is the thing though. No, I asked Michael Matthews this, actually. We heard from him before. When he was very upset with his stage 2 performance. And I said, do you think it's because of what happened on stage 1, which was like one of the most crash-marred grinder parts I've certainly ever seen. And I was expecting him to say, yeah, maybe we approached it more cautiously, but he just said, no, it's the first week of the Tour de France. This is the 1 week where anyone or more people than your mountain goats can wear a jersey. And everyone goes for it. It doesn't matter what happens the day before. And I think we also saw that today.
Do you know what? Before we go, Pete, we should find out, what have you been drinking?
Nothing by the sound of it.
I got back to my hotel room and the restaurant was closed tonight, but they put me a nice meat and cheese platter out and a couple of bottles of beer. So I've just knocked those back. So I'm not feeling quite as giddy as the other two by the sound of it, but I'm doing okay.
Well,
Do we sound drunk? Are you saying we sound drunk?
no one's saying that. God, everyone back down. Jesus. Anyway, thank you very much to Jeremy, to Pete, and to Sophie as well. Thank you for listening. Please do make sure you subscribe and leave us a rating. If you don't leave 5 stars, Jeremy's either going to cry or drink the rest of the bottle of wine, and you know what happens then. We'll be back in a few days to see who is actually still part of this race. Till then, there is more writing on lacourseontet.com and loads of wholesome content via the Peloton social channels. As always, thanks again to our sponsor, High Price. Thank you very much to them. Until next time, I'm going to go. If someone will just pop this shoulder back in for me. Ah!
Via, via, vieni via di qui. Niente più ti lega a questi luoghi, neanche questi fiori azzurri.